I've been employed by my current company for a considerable period now, approximately 6 years, to be precise. Due to the length of time I've dedicated to the company, I hold seniority over the other associates. Not to mention I possess significantly more training and credentials compared to them. The company recently secured a new contract involving a large government office building. The location of this building is quite peculiar for a government facility, so I won't specify the exact spot. But to give you an idea of the area and why it's strange, it's situated in a region that's essentially in the middle of nowhere. It features a massive 6-story building encircled by a large parking lot. This parking lot is itself bordered by a metal fence standing about 10 feet tall. Barbed wire runs along the top of the fence. There's only a single point of entry and exit, located at the front of the building where the parking lot meets the side road it's situated off of. This side road is roughly 3 miles away from the main road that leads to the highway. The fence is completely encircled by woods. There are genuinely no buildings, houses, or any signs of civilization for miles in every direction. Because of my seniority, I have the flexibility to work whichever shifts and days I prefer. Typically, I opt for morning or evening shifts, ensuring I have weekends, or at least Fridays and Saturdays off. However, unfortunately, after a few months into this new contract, we began experiencing difficulties retaining personnel for the overnight shifts. During daylight hours, there are usually about 3 guards working, covering all 7 days of the week. On the overnight shift during weekdays, there are typically 2 guards. And on the overnight shift during the weekend, from Friday through Sunday, there was just 1 guard assigned. It's worth mentioning before I proceed that every guard is armed on every single shift. As I stated, we were facing challenges keeping staff on the overnight shifts, particularly the weekend overnight shift. Consequently, my supervisor asked if I could assist by working some overtime on those weekend overnight shifts until they could hire replacements. I could have, and looking back, probably should have, declined the offer. But at that specific time, I actually needed the extra income because I was preparing to move into a new apartment soon. So I agreed to take on the additional shifts. The first couple of weeks went smoothly. No issues arose, nothing out of the ordinary. However, what transpired during the 3rd weekend is precisely what made me regret my decision to accept the overtime. It was a Saturday night around 2 a.m. A very severe thunderstorm was occurring outside. I was seated in the camera control room, which is located on the top floor. The control room has a window offering a view of the back section of the parking lot. Inside the room, there are 3 large computer screens displaying the live CCTV feeds from all the cameras positioned throughout the building, as well as the few cameras situated outside in the parking lot and near the entrance exit of the parking lot. I was sitting in the control room engaged in my usual overnight solo activities. The lights were off. I was watching movies I had previously downloaded on my phone, and also playing games on my Game Boy. I had been seated for a while and got up to stretch my legs and move around a bit. I was also starting to feel a bit drowsy and was contemplating going down the hall to the vending machine to get an energy drink. After getting up and walking around the control room a bit to stretch, I went over to the window and looked through the blinds towards the outside. As I watched, I was observing the heavy wind and rain blowing various debris around. I was just about to turn away from the window to get that energy drink when suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the area beyond the fence. And at that exact moment I saw a figure quickly move from one tree to another that was a significant distance away, perhaps about 20 feet. I remained where I was, looking in that direction through the blinds, waiting for another flash of lightning to see if I could determine exactly what it was, or if I had simply imagined it due to fatigue. A couple of seconds passed and another flash struck. This time I didn't see anything near or around the tree where I had observed the figure move to. At that point, I concluded that my eyes must have been playing tricks on me, likely because I was simply too tired. I moved away from the window and went down the hall to retrieve the energy drink. I immediately consumed the entire drink, hoping its effects would kick in quickly. I finished it by the time it took me to walk back to the control room, which wasn't long, only about 5 minutes. I returned to the control room and immediately noticed that one of the camera feeds on the screen had been lost. It was the feed showing the back part of the parking lot, the very area overlooked by the window. I went over to the window and looked out through the blinds in the direction of the camera. I spotted it dangling in the wind, suspended by its wires from the post it was mounted on. I figured the strong winds must have somehow knocked it off. I sat back at my desk to complete my report for the night and then returned to what I was originally doing. A few minutes passed while I was watching a movie on my phone when I heard the alert sound the system emits when someone accesses a part of the building requiring a keypad code entry. I glanced at the main screen and opened the tab displaying the building's access points. It indicated that the access point being used was the one located in the back of the building, near the back parking lot. At that moment, a shiver ran down my spine as I realized someone was outside. From the shadowy figure to the knocked-out camera feed, and now the keypad being accessed, the sequence of events was unsettling. Whoever was out there had the correct code because the system showed a green light, indicating successful entry. I reasoned that it couldn't be another worker or security guard. If it was a worker, we would have received a memo detailing who they were and their scheduled times and location within the building. I knew it wasn't a security guard because I would have been informed about that as well. I picked up the phone on my desk intending to call the police, but it was dead. I checked my personal phone, but of course, there was no service. I figured the best course of action would be to try walking down the hallway to see if I could get a signal on my phone. I left the control room and stepped into the hallway. I started walking down the hallway towards the service stairwell, all the while looking at my phone, hoping to get a signal soon. Just then, as I was looking down at my phone, the power shut off entirely. I immediately decided that since I was so close to the stairs, I would run down them to the front lobby and then run out the door to my truck. I reached the stairwell door and opened it. It was almost completely dark inside. I decided to use the darkness to my advantage and walk quietly down the steps. I figured whoever had cut the power must be in the generator room, which was located in the basement. Unfortunately, the basement was the only flight of steps below the lobby, which was where I was heading. Also, the generator wasn't far from the stairwell I was in. I made it down to the 4th floor and suddenly heard a door open at the bottom of the stairwell. I froze instantly. At this point, I knew I was armed, but I was thinking to myself that even though I had undergone training, I didn't believe I was truly ready to shoot anyone. I was hoping and praying it wouldn't come to that. As I stood there, lost in thought about my firearm training, I started hearing heavy footsteps ascending the stairs. I wasted no time formulating a new plan. I was going to turn around and walk back up the stairs as quickly and quietly as possible, aiming for the 6th floor where I had come from. Near the top of the stairs, just a few feet past the door while still in the stairwell, there's a ladder leading up to a hatch that provides access to the roof of the building. My intention was to climb the ladder to the rooftop area, just before reaching the hatch itself, and then hide in the absolute darkness until whatever was happening next played out. I turned around to execute this plan, but as I did, my gun struck the metal railing of the stairwell, creating a loud clang. The sound made me freeze, and it also seemed to halt the heavy footsteps instantly. A few seconds passed, and then I heard whoever it was running as fast as they could up the steps. I sprang into action, running up the steps with all my might, as if my life depended on it. As I reached the top of the steps, just before I was about to pass the door I had come from, I had a sudden idea to create a diversion. I quickly flung the door open hard and loud, then let go of the handle, allowing it to slam shut on its own. I continued running towards the ladder and climbed up it. By doing this, I hoped it would appear as if I had run out through the door. With only seconds to spare, I made it up the ladder. The person, distracted by the door, opened it without looking in my direction and ran into the hallway. The heavy door closed behind them. That's when I saw my opportunity. I leapt down from the ladder, a drop of about 10 feet, landing with a loud thud as my feet hit the floor. I bolted for the stairs. The person must have heard the sound because I had barely made it down one flight before I heard the door open again and their footsteps pounding down the stairs after me. We were both sprinting as fast as we could. I managed to stay one floor ahead of them the entire time. When I reached the lobby, luck seemed to be on my side. Behind me, I heard a loud crashing noise followed by a cry of pain. I wasn't certain, but I believed the person had tripped and fallen on the stairs. I wasn't about to wait around to confirm. I burst through the door, ran straight for the entrance, used my key to unlock it, and hurried out to my truck. Fortunately, I always parked my truck nearby. Amidst the howling wind and pouring rain, I pressed the fob to start the engine and unlock the doors as I sprinted across the parking lot. I jumped into the truck, shifted it into reverse, and just then caught sight of him. Dressed all in black, his face covered by a mask and hood, bursting out of the building and charging towards my car. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it, the tires screeching as I tore out of the lot and onto the side road. It wasn't until I was nearly at the main road that I finally got a signal on my phone. I immediately called the police. They arrived approximately 15 minutes later, and I followed them back to the building. I recounted everything that had happened, filling out reports for both the police and my company. We searched the entire building and the surrounding area but found nothing. The scariest part came when they checked the stairwell. Apparently, when the person had fallen, they had dropped something. The police recovered a fully loaded, unregistered, semi-automatic handgun. To this day, no one knows why someone would have broken into that building. There wasn't anything particularly special about it, except that it was government property. Whatever the reason, I'm just thankful that luck was on my side that night. Story 2. I used to work the overnight shift as a security guard in a medium-sized corporate office building located in New Jersey. And for the most part, the nights were boring, quiet, and uneventful. Which is why what happened one particular night has remained so vividly etched in my memory for years. It began around midnight after the last employees had left the building, and the lobby was empty except for me. Just me and the glow emanating from the security monitors. My duties were fairly straightforward. Check the cameras, conduct a couple of patrol rounds, log any incidents, and mostly just sit and watch for anything out of the ordinary. That night, I was going through my usual routine, scanning the screens for the elevators, the hallways, and the underground parking garage, when I noticed a figure moving among the cars on the lower garage feed. This immediately caught my attention because the lot should have been completely empty at that hour. Only individuals with 24-hour access could enter, and I knew no one had it at that moment. Initially, I thought it might be one of the late-shift IT personnel, or perhaps a member of the cleaning crew, but that didn't make sense since the cleaning crews had departed hours earlier, and the figure wasn't carrying any equipment or wearing a uniform. He was wearing a long dark coat that seemed slightly oversized, and he wasn't heading towards any specific car or the exit. He was simply moving slowly, weaving between the rows of cars as if inspecting the area or ensuring no one was present. And something about the way he moved sent chills down my spine. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but it felt wrong. I radioed my supervisor and explained what I was seeing. He instructed me to remain at my post and keep an eye on the cameras, which I did. But my gut feeling told me I needed to check it out in person. So I grabbed my flashlight and headed down to the garage. The elevator ride felt long and slow, with every passing floor echoing in the shaft, making me more on edge than I cared to admit. When the doors opened on the garage level, I scanned the area with my flashlight, but it was empty and completely silent. The kind of silence that seems to press against your ears and makes every small creak of the building sound magnified. I called out, "Hello, security here," but only silence echoed back, and I heard no reply. I walked slowly down the rows of cars, shining my light into every dark corner and every space between vehicles. But there was nothing there. Not a single shadow, not a single person. My pulse was racing, and I began to doubt myself, thinking perhaps the camera was malfunctioning or maybe it had merely captured a shadow that wasn't real. So I returned upstairs to the lobby, trying to shake off the feeling. But the moment I sat back down and looked at the garage feed again, there he was, standing in the exact same spot, as if he hadn't moved since I had been down there. And now my stomach plummeted because I knew I had just been there. There was no way he could have gotten back to the same spot without me noticing unless he had been watching me or worse, waiting for me. I radioed my supervisor again, telling him I was going to keep monitoring the cameras, and he instructed me not to approach the figure unless absolutely necessary, which was easier said than done because I couldn't stop staring at him. and my mind was already racing through every possible scenario. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him slowly make his way towards the stairwell that led to the upper floors. He moved cautiously, pausing occasionally and looking over his shoulder as if checking for someone, and then he disappeared from the camera's view just before reaching the door, which made my stomach clench. I checked every other camera feed, hallways, elevator lobbies, even the rooftop access, and there was nothing. No sign of him whatsoever, which only deepened my unease because it was impossible for him to vanish that quickly. It gave me a sinking feeling that he had found a way into the building, or that he was hiding in a manner I couldn't detect. I remained at my desk, my heart pounding, until the elevator dinged and opened in the lobby. No one was inside, but on the polished floor I noticed wet footprints leading from the elevator out into the main lobby. The prints were from bare feet, which seemed wrong on multiple levels. It was freezing outside, and he would have had to remove his shoes just to wander barefoot. I froze in my tracks, realizing that if he was now inside the building, he could be anywhere. Every unlocked office or storage room became a potential hiding spot. I called the local off-site patrol for backup and debated locking myself in the lobby. But something within me insisted I do a patrol and confirm the situation, a decision I likely regret in retrospect. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and began walking slowly down the hallway, flashlight in hand, scanning every office door for any sign of movement. Every creak from the building made me jump. Halfway down the hall, I saw one of the office doors slightly ajar, which shouldn't have been possible because it was always locked at night. I pushed it open carefully with my flashlight peering inside, but the room was empty save for a sleeping computer monitor and a chair tucked neatly under the desk. Nothing else was there. I stepped back out into the hallway and froze because I heard footsteps on the tile behind me. Not my own, heavy, wet, and uneven footsteps moving fast towards me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I swung my flashlight around the hall, catching a glimpse of the dark coat at the end of the hallway. He wasn't running, but he was moving quickly with purpose. And it hit me. He had been following me the entire time, hiding just out of sight whenever I checked the cameras. I bolted, sprinting down the hall towards the stairwell, barely registering the handrail slamming against my arm as I rushed past. The footsteps followed close behind, echoing clearly in the hall. I realized I had no idea how he had gotten inside, no idea what he wanted, and the panic was almost suffocating. I dove into the stairwell, slid down a few steps, and slammed the door shut behind me as the footsteps thundered on the floor above. Then they stopped abruptly, and I sat there shaking for several minutes, trying to catch my breath and convincing myself I had imagined it all. But the sound of my own breathing and the lingering echo of those steps made me feel like I was going insane. When the patrol finally arrived, I was pale, sweaty, and trembling. We walked through the building together, floor by floor, room by room, and the garage was completely empty. No sign of the intruder, no footprints, nothing at all. And when we checked the cameras, the footage from the time he appeared had been overwritten or corrupted, leaving a gap in the recording that made my skin crawl even more. I quit that job within a month, partly because of the fear, and partly because I couldn't stand walking those hallways alone anymore, especially when the garage was empty and the wind outside made the building creak, because every shadow and every noise reminded me of him walking behind me, just out of sight, waiting. Even years later, I get anxious in parking garages or office buildings at night, and I still find myself checking over my shoulder more than I should, thinking I might see that long coat rounding a corner, hearing those wet footsteps behind me again. And I know that what I experienced supernatural. It wasn't a faceless ghost or a phantom. It was a real person, a stalker, and the thought that he had been inside that building following me, hiding just out of view, and that I might never know how he got in or what he wanted, is something that still haunts me every time I think about that night. Story 3. This happened to me a few days ago. In fact, it was my very first night of training as a mobile security guard. Before I get into my story, I just want to clarify that a mobile security guard is primarily someone who drives around in a vehicle and performs site visits wherever the client requires security. In this instance, it was within the GTA of Toronto, But the actual incident took place at a nearby pharmacy/medical clinic in Mississauga. It was my first night on the job as a trainee, and my supervisor, who was quite nice, was showing me the ropes, how to conduct patrols, write reports, disarm fire alarms, and so on. Usually, if an alarm is triggered, dispatch notifies us via radio and asks us to attend the site where the alarm occurred. However, on this occasion, we arrived at the medical clinic in Mississauga to conduct a standard perimeter patrol, meaning no alarm had been triggered. We arrived at the site around 1:15 a.m. to ensure everything was normal. But as we got out of the vehicle and approached the building, something felt terribly wrong. For one, the underground parking garage was left open, and two, the front door of the building was busted open. My supervisor then exclaimed, "What the? How is this possible? If someone broke in, the alarm should be on." I didn't know how to react, as this was my first time at the site. Moreover, according to my supervisor, this was a new contract that our security company had recently secured. We entered the building cautiously, but suddenly my supervisor said, "Look at the elevator. It's moving between different levels." He wasn't kidding. As the elevator moved from G1, 2, 3 and stopped at level 4, which was the very top floor, I asked if he thought someone was inside. He immediately nodded and drew his baton. At that moment, I felt sick to my stomach and started breathing heavily. I really hated my job at that point and didn't want to be there. We immediately got into the elevator and went straight to the top level. I had a bad feeling, and adrenaline was surging through my body as the elevator door was about to open. As we ascended each level, I kept thinking to myself, what if something happens? What if whoever this is doesn't leave without a fight, and might even charge at us as the door opens? Fortunately, when we arrived at the 4th floor, no one was there waiting. It was extremely dark, so we turned on the lights and began investigating the rooms on that floor. My supervisor told me to stay close to him, as he was also feeling uncomfortable. He said, "Make sure you stick with me and get ready to confront this person." Thankfully, no one was present. We were quite shocked and unsure of what was happening until we heard footsteps descending the stairwell. My supervisor and I were about to open the door to the stairs and pursue whoever it was inside. However, just then, the footsteps stopped, and it became very quiet. All we could hear was each other breathing. What my supervisor said next to dispatch is something I will never forget, and still echoes in my mind. He radioed, "A4, call C25. Go ahead." "Dispatch, we need immediate backup. Please be advised. Someone is in the building with us and they're hiding downstairs, possibly armed and waiting for us to come closer so they can ambush us." Dispatch instructed us to stay where we were and not approach the suspect or whoever was downstairs, assuring us backup would arrive shortly. At that point, my supervisor started panicking, which only made the situation worse. He should have been the one to remain calm and lead, not feel anxious. But then again, I don't blame him, as the experience was overwhelming and terrifying for me too. Now, my supervisor was only a couple of years older than me, so I tend to call him bro instead of sir or whatever. I told him, "Bro, don't worry. I'm sure backup will arrive shortly. You might be wondering why we couldn't just exit and run. Well, the suspect could be on the ground floor, meaning they could be anywhere. So with the elevator potentially making noise, they might be alerted and immediately stand in front of it, blocking our escape. The suspect could approach us by coming upstairs, but perhaps they figured we might attack them by surprise. That might be why they were quietly waiting at the bottom of the stairs." About 15 minutes later, we heard the door open. It was our senior supervisor, and his voice echoed, "Security." My supervisor radioed him saying, "Sir, we're upstairs. Be careful. There's someone downstairs." A few minutes later, the senior supervisor met us upstairs and told us to come investigate with him. So we did, but we searched everywhere downstairs and on each floor, finding no one. As we were on the 3rd floor, scanning each room and bathroom to see if the person was there, we heard the front door open and footsteps running outside. We weren't fast enough to see who it was because by the time we got to the ground floor, the suspect was gone. Both my supervisor and I were in shock because we had searched everywhere and didn't find anyone. Either that person was hiding in an incredibly well-concealed spot, or that medical clinic center was haunted. I don't think I'll ever know. But this was by far the most horrific experience of my life. And coming this weekend, I'll be there again for site visitation, but this time alone as I'll be trained by someone else.